It's Thursday, October 21. I'm Nat Edwards and this is AFL Daily.
The champions have been able to do what only the toughest and strongest could do in 2020. The Tigers again.
The Saints fans, stand up. Your team has played a fantastic game tonight and they have beaten one of the best teams in the comp and certainly the best team over the last 3 or 4 years by 40 points.
It's a signature win for the Gold Coast Suns. Their very existence has been questioned by their critics and they've responded by knocking over the back-to-back premiers.
Well, a year is certainly a long time in football and Sunday marks the 12-month anniversary of Richmond's most recent premiership. Today we thought we'd look back at Richmond's triumph at the Gabba. Do they have another flag in them? And if not, where to next? Damien Barrett joins me as always as we go in depth on the Tigers. And Damo, you were there 1 year ago come Sunday at the Gabba. It was a magnificent flag given all the twists and turns that season 2020 had to offer.
It was, Nat, and it is a long time ago now, isn't it? Because a whole new season has been run and won, and we've got the new future, that being the Melbourne Footy Club, and we get to this point, 12 months on, and there's a lot of question marks around the Tigers. They've been asking themselves those same questions, and they've been trying to address them, and here we are going to be having a go at it to coincide with effectively the 12-month anniversary of their most recent success, and how they're going to look in 2022, because you get to the end of the 2021 and there are so many question marks around the entire competition, and I think there's as many attached to this football club as there are any other club going into that particular season.
They were a mighty side though. I mean, we look at it, 3 flags in 4 years. Dustin Martin, just the grand final GOAT. We might as well just call him Norm. I mean, 3 Norm Smiths in 3 grand finals and 4 goals, 21 disposals against Geelong in that grand final last year. I mean, to have a player like him during that era, and he's still a very, very good player given he had his season cut short in 2021 with that kidney injury. But gosh, when you actually sit back and reflect on what they've achieved in their side, it's quite incredible.
Oh, it is, and what they now still want to do, but to continue this successful patch in their footy club is going to be really interesting. That I mean, the issue around him is a big one. I mean, you talk about question marks around the club. I mean, how is he going to be when he plays football again? I mean, we know that he's lost a lot of weight as a result of that hit to the body from Mitch Robinson late in the season, which caused him to miss the remainder of it. And you know, he will be planning to have a pre-season, but how he responds to it, how he fits in, having had that serious, the first one in his footy life, the serious footy injury, and what that means, and has he still got the motivation again? I mean, in the backs of his mind, of course he does. It's an easy question to answer when you said, are you still motivated? But as we've seen that with these even great clubs, historically successful clubs, there comes a point when the motivation is just lacking a couple of percentage points, and I think that's also part of this unknown about what lies ahead with Richmond. They've clearly recruited to continue it, Nat. You don't bring Robbie Tarrant in without that being a view. You don't sell to Robbie Tarrant, hey, come to us if they're going to be rebuilding. I mean, he's been through that a couple of times at North Melbourne. He's not leaving North Melbourne to go to Richmond with that in mind. So he's going because he's been told we're going to have another go. We still feel we are in a premiership window for 2022. People from the outside of the club may look at that and go, well, they're kidding themselves, but that's the way they're positioning themselves, for next year. And what happens beyond that, Nat? That they're even greater questions because of, how many more years have they got out of Koch and Revold to come, and what sort of impact will they have? But that's next year's question. Right now, I mean, they are preparing to add another flag to the 3 they've already got in this period.
Yeah, and I think if you look back at the season 2021 where they didn't make finals, the catch cry and really the headline was, the dynasty is over, it's done. But I'm not so sure it is, and I'm not sure the premiership window is closed yet, and I don't think the Tigers think that either. You look back, they had so many injuries to key players all throughout 2021. Very hard to get any consistency on field when you've got Prestia, Cochin, and Curvis, Vlauston. I mean, Hooley's retired now, but he missed patches. McIntosh as well, Lambert. There was just so many key players. The list goes on. Edwards, Bolter, Asprey. all throughout the year. And not only that, but if you look back at obviously coming into that 2021 season, they'd played in the last 4 finals series. So basically they've played an extra month of footy more than most other teams each year, a shorter break, and then you have 2 COVID affected years. It eventually catches up with you, doesn't it?
It did, Nat, and you refer to it being an extra month of football. I mean, literally it was an extra month on the calendar last year as well, and obviously the 2021 season wasn't pushed back a month. It started at the same time, so it's all valid arguments. The other aspect to it, Nat, and this was celebrated and discussed and dissected at the time, that they were able to use the initial COVID foray into the AFL system as a positive. Now, that wasn't easy to do. They were able to basically just commit to that date, October 24, 2020, as being the end game for them, and they had a lot of problems, as we knew and reported on during the course of 2020. But ultimately, every layer of problem became a galvanising a cumulative galvanising effect on it. And they got to the end day, and they weren't even worried about that 22-point deficit they had just before half time of that particular game. So there was the pride element too, I think, Nat, too, of we are going to just get through this mentally in 2020. They weren't able to last year, and all those injuries you just mentioned, because of the runway that they had less than other clubs to get ready for 2021, was all just too big for them early. And while we on this program kept saying we weren't going to, I did anyway, wasn't going to write them off until it was mathematically impossible. I really think if you reflect on what happened, they were gone, they were shot to bits a long way out in 2021.
It all starts with a vision, of course, and the Tigers had a really bold plan. I want to take a listen to Richmond CEO Brendan Gale's comments back in 2010.
I'm really confident we've got a core group of young guys that are talented enough to be part of 11th Premiership. I'm really confident in the kids we've brought into the system this year, and the Dustin Martins of these sorts of guys I think will be very good players for the club. But more importantly, some of the guys at the back end of the draft, I think they've recruited really wisely. But clearly, Gary, we have to go to the draft and we have to exercise our judgment very carefully. We have to make the right decisions. I make no apologies for the fact we want to be the best football club. We want to be the greatest.
You cop some flack about the fact that you put a document, an internal document that got out earlier than you would have liked, spoke of a membership target of 75,000, 3 flags in 2020, and over this 5-year plan or 10-year period.
It starts with a vision, and we're not here just to compete. No one is. There's no point. You might as well pack up and go, no, I'm not embarrassed. I'm actually proud of that. And we've got a vision to compete and to be the best on the field, the best off the field. If we're not locked into that, we might as well pack up and go home. If we can't build the capacity of our club over the next 5 years, some real muscle and horsepower, we're not going to get there. It's going to take a lot longer. So we've got to improve our footy performance. We've got to make 3 final series over the next 5 years. We've got to build our commercial strength, reflected in a whole range of measurements, but notably membership, Gary. And, we've got to manage our finances better. We've got to retire debt. And if we can do that, I think we're well on the way to ticking those boxes.
So we're all really familiar with that, Damo, and, the Tigers would have a plan for the next 5 years, the next 10 years. They're always looking ahead. What do you think that plan might be?
It's a different one, isn't it, Nat? Because it was the selling of hope back then, wasn't it? And it's still incredible to listen to that conversation with Brendan Gale, because, again, Nat, I was working at another place at the time, and I was at the front of the queue ridiculing them, not in a nasty way, but just, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? And I don't think I was on my own there, by the way. People were thinking, this club has had, at that stage, 30-plus years of football misery, and what are they doing committing to this? So it just tightened them up, didn't it? It sharpened the whole business up. It's become a blueprint for other clubs. You ask me what they do now. They can't sell, I don't believe, that same hope now because of the fact they've still got these ageing superstars in a past footy life on their list. You can't prepare, I don't feel, for anything beyond 2022 with Cochin, with Revolt. So how they present that publicly, Nat, is going to be an exercise in itself. But while they've got them on the list, the premiership window is still now. Clearly, it is still now. They're not going around again with those players. They're not bringing Tarrant in without that being their mindset for next year. How that looks in the next 5-year plan, Nat, I'm not going to even hazard a guess at it because there's far greater footy brains attached to that footy club than we are on the outside. And they've done it once before. There's a question there. Does Brendan Gale want to commit to that next time? Does he need to freshen up? I mean, these are all questions I think that will be asked. And if they're not being asked, they're not doing their own due diligences on their own operations, because there is a lifespan for anyone of any official nature at a footy club, as we've seen with what's happened at Hawthorn in the last 6 months.
I mean, they don't have to necessarily bottom out either, because I know you talk about the older core of that side. But you look at their draft hand, I'm just looking at the indicative draft order as it stands now after the trade period. And so they've got pick 7, which, they're going to get a fantastic player there. Then they've got 26, 27, 28 as well. So they've got a pretty good draft hand that they might be able to regenerate quickly. You look at Sydney and they've never really had to bottom out, and they're always able to kind of just keep up amongst it and regenerate. I'm sure Richmond are looking at doing something similar. I did just want to ask you about Damien Hardwick himself, because where does he sit for you in the landscape of, I guess, the best coaches? Because we always talk about Alistair Clarkson being one of the best coaches of the modern era, but what about Dimmer, given that if you look at the way Hawthorn and probably Richmond have built their dynasties, the Hawks probably had more top draft picks to build their flags around, as opposed to Richmond, who were probably building during that compromised draft period with Gold Coast and GWS dominating in that 2010-2011 patch?
Yeah, it's a great question, and if you want to back the Damien Hardwick horse in that race against Alistair Clarkson, you're going to be confident and comfortable of the outcome of that. It's easy to mount an argument that his achievements in 2017, 19 and 20 were more meritorious than Clarkson's in 2013, 14 and 15. They both had years within their successful patches. Hawthorn, for instance, in 2012 lost the grand final. Richmond in 2018 failed to make a grand final. So they've also reacted to adversity and improved upon the lessons to be taken out of those moments in key finals. Look, the list build of Hawthorn to get it to 13, 14 and 15, that was a very smart overseeing operation at that footy club with those two expansion clubs that you mentioned, Nat. They just were smart enough to just read the room and have an already established and good list, but just bring in players as free agents while other clubs were complaining about not getting access to key talent in drafts. So, look, their timeline was perfect for that to be done. Richmond's was arguably better because the same team that ultimately got them, effectively anyway, the 17 premiership, I mean, you add Prestia, which was a key component to that, but the rest of it was a pretty much organically developed team, wasn't it, Nat? And that's to Hardwick's credit, it's to the club's credit. And look, again, you could comfortably have Damien Hardwick being a better coach in that particular era of success of those two footy clubs. And then to have that conversation, you then go back to 2008, obviously, where you need to throw that into the overall Alistair Clarkson story. But if you're measuring the two teams from 2013 to 20, well, yeah, I'm probably backing Hardwick.
Let's fast forward to 12 months' time. Hopefully we're still doing AFL Daily in a year's time. Has Richmond made finals in 2022 or not?
I think in this conversation that I've convinced myself they have. I just look you touched on it. The runway that they didn't have to prepare for 2021 was a massive issue in the end because of the mental aspect of 2020 as much as the physical one. So yeah, they're going to regroup, they're going to reassess, they're going to refresh, and we're going to see a different Richmond. You mentioned finals. Yeah, I'm saying finals. I don't see them doing what I think that it is they're preparing to do, and that is get back to the last day of the final series. Where do you see them?
Yeah, I see them going deep in finals, to be honest. I can't see why not, why they can't make a grand final. For the history buffs out here, they do have history on their side because the 4 previous times the Tigers have missed finals the year after winning a flag, they have rebounded quickly. It happened in the 1920s. 67, they won the flag, slid out of the finals the next year, then won the flag in 69. They fell away again in 1970, then made a prelim the next year, a grand final in 72, and then won back-to-back flags. And the same trend happened in 1980 to 1982. So I am backing in this historic trend to happen once again in 2022.
I love the fact you've gone back to the 1920s now. I absolutely love it. If they are, Nat, there needs to be a significant shift, though, of the power base, doesn't there, within the club itself and who runs out each week as part of the 22. And what I'm referring to there, it needs to be Short's club now. It needs to be Soldo's club. It needs to be Graham's club, Baker's club. Even Riley Collier-Dawkins should put himself into that potential mixer around it all. Jack Ross needs to have, the season that they thought he was going to have when they drafted him, and he's just sort of been on the fringes. He's certainly got the ability and the talent to do so. It has to be his year. So Sydney Stack has to have the year that they wanted him to have. So it needs to be that shift, doesn't it? I think from away from the established players who've got them the success to this point. That needs to be what happens in 2022 if they are to continue that historical return to finals after success, Nat.
After all of this talk about the Tigers, I just want the season to start already. It's only October. At least we've got W to keep us occupied within a couple of months. Just before we wrap up, Callum Toomey, our colleague, had a story on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app yesterday about clubs asking the vaccination status of draftees to ensure, I guess, that they're ready to go and join their AFL club after the November draft. Now, the AFL, we should reiterate, this has not released its official COVID-19 vaccination policy. We're hopeful they'll do that next week, but the league is strongly encouraging all its players in the wider community to get vaccinated. What are your thoughts here on clubs asking for vaccination status?
I've long had an issue, Nat, with some of the questions that these kids are being asked by recruiters. There's been a streamlining and a sharpening up of this process, and there had to be, because some of the questions that kids were being asked, even as relatively recently as the early 2000s, I just think were wrong. When it comes to 2021, though, going into 2022 with COVID being part of our lives, I think it's a valid question. It can be asked in a respectful way as well. But ultimately, it's a private answer if they want to take it. I mean, look at poor Tom McDonald, who we discussed on earlier in this week, daring to have an opinion on a subject as this and being shot down, and that was almost $1.01 that he was going to be shot down because people do that. But I think it's a fair question to ask. It would be of assistance to these players, though, about to be drafted if there was an official industry policy. I understand why that has taken time. It needs to obviously be very thorough, and it needs to take in every single scenario. Ultimately, Nat, as we've been saying for even I'd say a couple of months now, the governments will determine the AFL policy. They already have. You need to have a double vaccination to play and train in this state as we speak right now, Victoria. So there's the policy. It's a good story from Kel, as always with Kel, and just also too, it gives an insight into what clubs are asking when it comes to these kids about to join them as future players of their club. It's not always just about the football.
All right, thanks, Damo. For all of your off-season and draft news, head to afl.com.au and the AFL Live app. Now, Cal and I will be live today on the AFL's official Facebook page to answer all of your questions on the draft in a special edition of Road to the Draft. So make sure you jump on at 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, or Daylight Time, actually, now that we're on. So thank you so much for listening to AFL Daily. We'll catch you tomorrow.